Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, I have a special gun gripe episode for you. I have a special guest here, Mr. Michael Cargill. Now, you guys probably remember some of the things that we've talked about in some of our previous videos in regards to the Fifth Circuit Court decision on the Bumpstock case. Well, Michael here is the one who sued the ATF. So this is his baby, and we'd like to have him as a guest here to kind of discuss some of the things that are going on with it and some of the very important connotations that it could have for us in the future in regards to this brace situation. So I think there could be some light at the end of the tunnel that maybe some are not considering. Maybe some people have been following this case. But Michael, thanks so much for hanging out with me here today. And I'm ready to hear your story, and I want to hear how this fight's been going for you. Tell our viewers a little bit about who you are, where you're at, what you do. Give them some background.
Sure. So Michael Cargill, I'm the owner of Central Texas Gunworks, which is a gun store in Austin, Texas. I've actually served 12 years in the United States Army. I own the gun store that does, we're an 07 FFL. We have an SOT. We do training. We do gun sales, transfers. I'm an instructor for license to carry handgun. I'm an instructor for level 2, level 3 security officers and also level 4 security. I'm an instructor for school safety and also first responders. So we do all that type of training and also the gun sales and everything. And I've been doing this for quite a while. I've actually been teaching people how to shoot for 20 years. And I love it. And I wouldn't be doing anything other than doing this.
So when it comes to the Bumpstock situation, I know that there were a heck of a lot of people when the original ruling came down about Bumpstocks. Of course, we know that Trump abused executive fiat and gave the ATF some pretty scary rulemaking ability and allowed them to abuse Chevron deference, which is exactly the same reasoning or logic that we see in this brace situation. So what made you want to fight so hard for Bumpstocks originally?
Right. So back when the Bumpstock ban came down back in, what was it? We talked about this in 2018. It happened in 2019. Everyone was saying, Michael, why do you care so much about Bumpstocks? I said, well, it's really not about the Bumpstock. I don't think a lot of people actually own them. It's not about that. What it's about is that it's something that you legally own, you legally purchase, and the federal government saying they're going to come and take it. It's banned. They're going to confiscate it. You have to destroy it. And for me, you give them that inch, then they're just going to take a mile. And if people are saying, we don't care about Bumpstocks, you should give them up. Let's just go ahead and let them have that. And I said, that's crazy to me. That's insane, because if you give the ATF an inch, they're going to take a mile. You give them the Bumpstock, and then when this office, the office changes, it flips side to the other side, then they're going to take other things. And I said, we can't give this up. And so I decided to, search out for different attorneys, look for someone that was willing to assist me, and found this lawsuit. And luckily I came across a group of attorneys who were not gun attorneys at all. They're constitutional attorneys, but they never had a gun case. But they were looking at this case here because they thought it was actually crazy too. And so they're looking for a client to file a lawsuit, against the federal government, the ATF, for trying to actually step outside of their authority, because, we know how bills become law. Someone in Congress writes a bill, it goes to a committee, it goes to both houses, then it goes to the president signs it, becomes law. We've all heard of that Schoolhouse Rock song. And so not the ATF, not a federal agency, not the EPA, not OSHA, not an agency within a federal government actually creating law and doing whatever they want. And so I said, this is crazy. It's got to stop. So we got together with this law firm and we filed a lawsuit in federal court against the Department of Justice and also the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
It's pretty crazy when you look at just how bold that they've gotten with this stuff. And, when you make a rule change like this, like whether it's Bumpstocks or braces, you're talking something that carries criminal penalties. This isn't just as simple as like when Chevron deference was originally used in, like, I believe it was some EPA proceedings where they had to do some minor administrative housekeeping to just sort of smooch along the process and make it a little bit easier to a little more palatable, maybe involving a fine or an administrative indifference, right, that they were having. But we're talking, this is something that carries criminal penalties. I mean, we're not talking just a kindly worded memo that says, hey, by the way, this is the situation we're looking at. When we are talking something that carries criminal penalties, and Chevron deference was never meant to be used, or in this case, abused, in anything that involves criminal penalties. So, so with the Fifth Circuit, now I know that it didn't originally go through the Fifth Circuit, as we discussed earlier. You had mentioned that it went through some lower courts. It wound up getting pushed back. You had some resistance, but then once you finally went to the Fifth Circuit with the full panel of judges, they wound up seeing this in your favor. Why don't we kind of talk about that a little bit? How did that go?
Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit and talk about that first court. So we went to federal court in Austin, Texas, and we actually went to court in 2020 during the COVID period when everything was shut down. And this was the only case in federal court. Matter of fact, this is the first case that year in federal court post-COVID. And so we went to court. The judge, said, hey, I'm a gun guy. I have rifles. And so he said, what you guys are telling me, ATF, and this is his response to the ATF, is that the bump stock is kind of like a shotgun where I pull, back with my left arm, on the rifle there, and then I fire it. And so that was his mindset. And I was like, man, there's, we're going to lose this case, in this court here. So I just sat back in my chair. I just listened, and I figured it was Austin, and this was a Democrat, a liberal judge that was actually appointed to this bench. And I said, there's no need in even fighting this. This guy is just going to rule against us. He's not understanding, not even trying to understand what we're talking about. So we lost that case in the first court, and then we appealed to the Fifth Circuit. But once you get to the Fifth Circuit, the appellate court, which is in New Orleans, it's heard in front of a 3-judge panel. And the Fifth Circuit is actually comprised of mostly conservative judges that were appointed by Republicans. There are probably about, I think, 4 Democrat judges appointed to this circuit. So we pulled a 3-judge panel. And let me ask you, out of the 3-judge panel that we pulled, how many do you think were Democrat appointed justices?
I would say all of them, more than likely.
Right. So all of them, we pulled 3 Democrat justices. So of course they heard this case, and we were dead on arrival. Absolutely. They agreed with my point, is that the ATF can't create law. They agreed with that. But they said, we just, we're going to side with the government on this one, and we're going to send a letter. They decided to send a letter to Congress to say, hey, Congress, just so you know, you guys might want to write a law to ban bump stocks because, ATF can't create law. And so they still sided against us and sent that letter to Congress. So we lost that case in the 3-judge in front of the 3-judge panel. And we appealed this case in front of the entire circuit. It's very rare that the Fifth Circuit will hear a case in front of all of the justices there. And this is very intimidating because you're talking about there are 17 judges in this courtroom. One was not present, so this case was heard in front of 16 judges. And so they accepted our appeal. It was heard in en banc in front of the entire court. And the funny thing about the day we went to court, which is September the 13th of 2022, is when we went to court. And one of the judges said, hey, government, the ATF is telling us that for the last 10 years and 2 presidents, bump stocks were legal in this country. But today you're coming forward and you're saying they're now illegal. Why should we believe you today? Because the last 10 years you told us they were legal, and now today you're saying they're illegal. And they really didn't have a good answer for that. And so I knew by the questions that we were getting that actually were being actually given to the government side, I knew that we were going to win that court. The majority of the justices agreed with our point is that one, a bump stock is not a machine gun. A bump stock is a part. And they, agree with our definition of what a machine gun was. A machine gun, the definition is if when you pull the trigger and you hold the trigger, it shoots more than one round, then that is a machine gun. But when you pull the trigger and one pull of the trigger produces one round, is a semi-automatic. So one trigger pull, one round, semi-automatic. You pull the trigger, hold the trigger, shoots more than one round, that's a machine gun. So they agree with our definition, and they also agree that the ATF cannot write law. Congress does that. And we have, branches of government. We have a constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. And it's called a Bill of Rights. It's not called a Bill of Needs. And so they agreed with everything we said. And this circuit was so great in what they did. They put in detailed outlines in this ruling, the way they lined it out. And this ruling is so strong that when it goes forward, what's going to have to happen? It's going to have to go forward to the Supreme Court because we won in the Fifth Circuit. In the Fifth Circuit, that's just saying that we won for Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And in those three states, we can eventually get our bump stocks back. And in those three states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, the ATF can't write law. And so when another case comes forward and says, hey, the ATF is trying to take our brace, our brace away from us and make us register them, they're going to actually say, hey, take a look at the Cargill v. Garland case, and this is how you ruled on that case. So they should win, and we should get our brace back by using the Cargill v. Garland case for Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. In order for this to affect the entire United States, then we have got to get the Cargill versus Garland to the U.S. Supreme Court. And what has to happen there is the government has until February 28th to appeal this case to the Supreme Court and ask for a stay so that Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, we don't get our bump stocks back. And so if they don't request that stay, it goes back down to the lower court. And eventually, we're going to make it back up to the Supreme Court eventually. But the shorter route is for them to appeal right now and between now and February. And the government's really slow. So we're anticipating they're going to take a little time to think about what they want to do and write up what they're going to write up. They may request more time. And they're going to eventually, it's got to go to the Supreme Court because there's no way that the ATF is going to allow Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi to get bump stocks back and to say that Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi can also get their braces back because they can't write law. They're not going to let that happen. So they have to push this case all the way up to the Supreme Court.
We wind up seeing these situations, Michael, where a lot of the times the feds get hemmed up in some situation in court, like what they're dealing with you. Okay. And then a lot of times what we've seen in the past is they go, okay, all right, we're going to take a step back here. It's like the last thing they want is for it to go to the Supreme Court because they know that by establishing such high standing case law, right, the Supreme Court's the highest law or the highest court in the land. And, they're what they say goes. Now, when we look at what's happening with Bruen and all of this fiasco going on in New York right now, New York is fighting the Bruen decision left and right. I mean, there's California is fighting it. So we're not completely out of the woods yet, even though Bruen set forth some pretty important Supreme Court, juice to our back, if you will. However, in this situation, I think it's going to be very telling. I mean, I almost wonder, would it be in their best interest to not even appeal it at all from their end? I mean, what happens if February 28th comes around and it's crickets and you hear nothing from them?
I don't think that's going to happen. I think they don't have a choice because there's no way they're going to let just those three states get away with this. And you have other cases that are moving along in other circuits. So eventually the Supreme Court is going to have to hear one of these cases and decide.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah. And the key for everything is the Cargill v. Garland. This case is so important because if you go back and you read the ruling from the Fifth Circuit, it lays it all out. It's saying, hey, it stops the ATF in their tracks in everything that they're trying to do, whether it's a trigger, whether it's a magazine, whether it's a bump stock or a brace. It stops them in their tracks for everything because the way it's written. We didn't go after, the Second Amendment stands for this. We didn't take it to that, from that point of view. We took it from the point of view to where this case can fit any agency. You can take this case, you could take it over to the EPA and say, hey, EPA, you can't, regulate certain things here. Congress has to write a bill for that. You could take it over to another department and say, hey, you can't make people, wear a mask. You can't make vaccines mandatory. This stands for a lot of stuff. It's not just about guns. So we can actually fit this case to fit anything. We just happen to take it and say, what, for this particular product, we're talking about guns here. And I think because the way we framed this case, because it can fit any department of our federal government, the Supreme Court's going to take this case and we're going to win this case. I'm very confident of that. This is, to me, it's a chess game. It's not playing checkers.
That's right. And, recently there was a Supreme Court case that got shot down that had to do with Chevron deference. And I think one of the reasonings that they gave was, well, we don't really feel like this is a distinctive of enough, of the situation for us to, rule against Chevron deference. And they're waiting for the right case to come along. So Bingo. What better way than to say, hey, wait a minute, you don't have a right to just make some law out of thin air that has criminal penalties. That is the absolute litmus test for them to say, hey, the absolute worst abuse of Chevron deference is this. So Maybe this is the case that the Supreme Court has been waiting for. That's my hope.
And my attorneys have been studying that, and we've been aware of these other cases. So we wrote this up to where this will be tasty for the Supreme Court. And it's nice. This is a nice, juicy steak for them. This has been something they're waiting on because they want to. Clarence Thomas, I believe, wants to slap around these different agencies and put them in check for everything that's been done in 2020 and 2019. And I think he's waiting for something like this to really shut him down.
I think that we've never had a better situation with our Supreme Court to get movement on gun cases. And I think it was Justice Roberts that even said that the Second Amendment has always been treated like the redheaded stepchild when it comes to Supreme Court representation and them actually hearing cases related to it. And those weren't his exact words, but dang well that's what he's thinking. I mean, when you look at all of the areas of our rights and what actually makes it to the Supreme Court, like you see so many 1A things, right? But so few related to the Second Amendment. And, the Supreme Court has said on many occasions and many iterations of the court that they don't like getting involved in politics. Well, the Supreme Court is not a political organization. We prefer to stay out of politics. But why is it that the Second Amendment is a political bargaining chip when it's clearly not? It's one of the most clearly written things in our Constitution. It says exactly what it means, right? It's straight to the point. And it's one of the few that they actually go, hey, and by the way, you're going to keep your hands off this hot potato, Chief. You hear me? Right? So the Second Amendment is so sacred, right? It gives teeth to every other right that we have, every other right that we hold dear. It gives us the ability to enforce that document for its face value. And I think that there's never been a better time in recent memory, especially for folks our age and older, or heck, even these younger folks that they're in their 20s. They've never known of a Supreme Court case related to the Second Amendment that had any super far-reaching implications like what this could have. I mean, Heller was a decent game changer, but it didn't really give us the meat and potatoes we wanted, although it was a step in the right direction. And then Bruin, obviously, is a distinctive step in the right direction. And I think that this Cargill one is going to be one for the history books. I mean, your name is going to be right up there with Dick Heller. So
absolutely. And I believe so. And,
Good stuff.
The funny thing is that but there's a reason it's called the Second Amendment. They said, hey, the first, you have a right to express yourself and say, what you believe, we don't have to agree with it, but you have a right to say it. And by the way, when someone comes back and they try to shut you up from saying that, you can defend that with the second, and you can defend all your constitutional rights with the second. The second defends, it will protect the first, it protects the third, the fourth, and fifth, and so on and so on. It protects all of our constitutional rights. And that's why it's so important. And the funny thing about this court, the makeup of the Supreme Court, and a lot of people are so upset. They're upset about so many different things when it comes to the Supreme Court. And they're saying, oh, man, the Supreme Court's changing gears, and they're doing this, and they're doing that. Well, you know what? You know whose fault this was? And they praise Ruth Bader, RBG. They praised her, the Supreme Court justice. It's like, oh, she was one of the best justices, of their lifetime and all this kind of stuff. But you know what? It's her fault. It's her fault because she didn't know when to quit. She didn't know that as a justice, you're supposed to give up your seat doing, under if you're a Democrat appointed, you should give up that seat during the Democrats, reign. And so that a Democrat appointed president can appoint another, justice to that court. And she should have stepped down, but she didn't step down. Instead, she died in that seat under Republican president. And that is her fault because she knew that she wasn't well, and she should have stepped down. And so for that, President Trump comes in, appoints a conservative to that seat, and now this court has flipped, and now it's in our favor. And we're going to take this opportunity to get these things corrected the way they should be corrected in this court.
I really do feel like Clarence Thomas is on a mission. Like when you read, his statements about Bruen, it's quite clear that he's out for blood, and I'm here for it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now I'm excited about all of this. I'm excited about all these cases. I'm happy that someone actually has filed a case in Amarillo, Texas, against the ATF for the brace ban. That's been filed. That was filed, this week. And I'm hoping that they're granted, which I think they're going to be granted an injunction so we can stop the ATF from forcing us to register, our AR pistols. And then that way we can give the Cargill case an opportunity to make it to the Supreme Court and then shut them down completely.
So I'm sorry, y'all. There's a little bit of lag going on here, so I apologize for the lag. So our viewers, right, if they want to support you in your efforts, what can they do to help you directly with this lawsuit?
Yeah, and I apologize for my internet because we have no power here. So I'm having to, I'm on reserve power doing all this stuff. And internet's kind of messed up right now. So I'm glad you're able to still do the interview. And I know the reception may not be all that great. But please, if you want to support us, because we have multiple cases, we just don't have just the Bumpstock case. We have the case against the federal government for FFL dealers around the country because they're trying to shut down our mom and pop gun stores, all around the U.S. right now. And when you go into a gun store, your mom and pop gun store, you fill out that 4473, the firearms transaction record, and you make a mistake and you put in that little box that says county, you put in there the country, you're going to get that FFL in trouble if they miss that and don't correct you. And what's happening is people are making little small mistakes like that, and it's causing the ATF to do an inspection and shut the federal firearms license dealer down for those simple little minor mistakes. The way the law is written is that if an FFL dealer is transferring a firearm to a prohibited person, then they're committing a crime. But making little small paperwork errors is not transferring a firearm to a prohibited person. And so they're using this, they're going way outside what the letter of the law says, and they're using it just to go after mom and pop gun stores and shut them down all around the country because they figure there's a Democrat in office and there's no one to stop us and we can do whatever we want at this moment in time.
What a great point that you bring up there. Revocations are at all-time high under this administration, and they are shutting people down for the tiniest little issues. And, look, people are human beings. They make simple mistakes. It just happens. I mean, when you have something that's filled with so much craziness, I mean, like, you know how it is. You run a gun shop. It's busy. You may not catch it immediately. Now, a lot of FFLs have, a clerk there at their place of business that will, handle compliance and maybe look through the records and go, oh, we caught this little mistake, and maybe have the customer come back and correct it. Or 9 times out of 10, if not most of the times, you catch it right there at the point of sale. But the point is, we're all human beings and mistakes happen. And an FFL shouldn't get shut down over a tiny little error, right? That's a low blow. Like, that's a really poor reason to go after an FFL and have a revocation over something so simple.
Absolutely. And that's why we filed that lawsuit. We have so many things that were going on. We're actually suing the state of New York right now in conjunction with the NSSF, National Shooting Sports Foundation, and some other major manufacturers like Glock, Smith & Wesson, other distributors like Davison, RSR Group. I'm actually in a joint lawsuit against the state of New York. The state of New York says that if I sell a gun to someone here in Texas, and that gun gets stolen from that person I sold it to in Texas, and it winds up in New York somehow and used in the crime, then New York can come back and sue me and also the manufacturer and the distributor of that firearm. And that is insane, And so it's not just the Bumpstock lawsuit, it's the FFL lawsuits, state of New York. We have so many different things we're doing on all different fronts. And so I'm just asking people to go to michaelcargill.com. That's michaelcargill.com and support us, because there's so much going on. This agency, the ATF, is so out of control right now under this administration. We've got to do something where we shut this down.
And I think what winds up happening as well, Michael, is that, maybe they're so, like, they're such narcissists that they think, well, we got control of the ship. We can just do what we want, and there'll be no consequences. I mean, look at all the things that are going on. Look at them hiding the laptop story. Look at these documents. I mean, it's just, when you look at the entire situation and it's just holistic value, and you look at it for its face value, it looks like Michael might have gotten kicked off here for a moment. I'll see if he comes back. But I'll just say that it is clear that when you look at everything that's going on, of course, it is pretty scary, right? That they can abuse, just about every single administrative undertaking that they possibly can to get their way. And if no one holds them accountable, in a little bit of a way, it's almost in our favor that they're literally pulling every single page out of the playbooks. So when they're pulling these pages out of the playbook, it tells us, hey, here's what's really on their mind. Here's what they really have in store. Like, they can't do something through Congress. They can't get a law passed through Congress. Therefore, they're going to use this tiny little Chevron deference loophole to jump through in an attempt to get their way. Maybe it's good that they're doing what they're doing in the way they're doing it, so that now that we do have a proper Supreme Court that actually seems to care about us, maybe this is just their last hurrah, their last chance to try and slip something through. Like, this is their attempt to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks legally. And maybe they know that they're fighting a losing battle, and they're just trying to claw the walls on the way out.
That's right. And, I'm glad I got a chance to go to SHOT Show again this year and talk to, all the brothers and sisters out there, all the different companies, manufacturers, distributors, and groups and organizations. I got a chance to shake hands and chat with Gun Owners of America, NAGR, National Association of Gun Rights, the NRA, so that we hopefully we can actually stand together, shoulder to shoulder, and say, you know what, we're going to work together and stop the ATF and what they're trying to do right now. We're going to, rally around each other, because, we got to stand together. We can't depend on Congress to do anything right now. It took too long for Congress to, pick a speaker of the House. Don't know how things going to go in the Senate, as far as votes there. There's just, there's no way we can depend on Congress to actually write a bill to protect the brace. We have to do this through the courts. This is the only way. And we're talking some people have said it's 10 million, braces out there. Someone says it's 20 million. Someone says it's 40 million. Well, guess what? It's 10 to 40 million. Okay. There are a lot of them. This is something that's in common use. They're in so many homes in the United States. There's so many people that don't know that this brace ban is in effect. And if you get pulled over by law enforcement, you use one of these guns in self-defense situation, you can find yourself, in possession and charged with a felony. And you never even knew that it was actually illegal. And that was actually banned, because at the time you purchased it, it was legal. And so that's not how that's not how this country was formed. That's not who we are as a nation. And so we got to do better. We've got to fight this organization. We got to fight them and stand together with each other and shut them down completely, because this here is just insane. And I have to remind people that I'm in Texas, and in Texas or any state that you live in that borders another country. So Texas, we border Mexico. If you walk into Texas and you purchase 2 handguns from a federal firearms license dealer, or 2 rifles or shotguns from a federal firearms license dealer, then that dealer has to fill out a form, a multiple cell form, and it's sent in to the FBI and also to the chief law enforcement officer in the county that you live in. So if you had a brace that you purchase, AR pistol, and maybe you purchase a handgun with it, when you walk into the gun store, a multiple cell transaction form was filled out. That means that information, everything about you, everything about the make, the model, the serial number of that gun is in the possession of the FBI and the chief law enforcement officer in the county that you live in. So they already know what you have if there's a multiple cell form filled out. And that puts you in jeopardy if you haven't started the process of making your brace into an SBR and going through this new process. So I want to bring that up to people as well, because that's another way they can look at what you have, and you may not even realize they actually have this. Those multiple cell forms are very dangerous. And so they're going to go back and use those to come after people when we reach that 120 days after May 31st.
And we already know that the ATF has access to, let's just say, a database. Now, they don't call it a registry, but I don't give a crap what anybody says. It's a dang registry. So there's a lot of situations where I know many of you that are listening here on YouTube or wherever you're following us, you've probably seen situations where there's numerous videos on social media of FFLs recording their IOIs, taking pictures of 4473s on their personal cell phone, on government cell phones, scanning records into digital formats and everything. I mean, we saw the new 4473 that came out where they had all the information put conveniently on the front page to make scanning it a lot easier so they don't have to scan multiple documents. Now, they always say, Paperwork Reduction Act, but it's really about making it easier to digitize those into a searchable database. And that's one thing that people need to consider, too. It's pretty scary. And I just want to say, I've really enjoyed our conversation, Michael, and I think you're a patriot for doing what you're doing. I mean that. And you're putting your money where your mouth is. I mean, yeah, we operate within the gun industry. Yes, we make money on firearms. But at the end of the day, though, it is about self-preservation. That's the ultimate goal of what we do, is to protect ourselves and to allow people to have the teeth that they need to defend their rights. And when you put your personal money towards this fight, that says a lot about your character, and it says a lot about where you stand as a patriot and as someone who loves this country. And I can tell you're doing this for totally the right reasons. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. I hope it goes to the Supreme Court. I think it will. And I cannot wait to read what Justice Thomas has to say about this, because it's going to be a doozy. I'm going to pour myself a coffee and I'm going to read it over like poetry.
That's right. My attorneys are ready. We are prepared to fight and argue this case in the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. And I truly hope we get our day in court, because we have so much information to lay on the laps of the justices there. We want to give them the opportunity to weigh in on this. They deserve to weigh in on this, and to let all agencies within our federal government know they cannot write law. And so go to my website, michaelcargill.com. That's michaelcargill.com, and check out our website. Help out any way you can. Support us. Get other organizations out there to reach out to us and support us. The more we can get the word out and educate people on what's going on. I want everyone to know this knowledge about multiple cells. If you're in Florida, because you're so far away from Cuba, if you're in Texas, if you're in Arizona, you're in California, and you're in any state up north that borders Canada, you're in jeopardy of the multiple cell form and how this is going to affect you. So that's why we're, trying to bring light to everyone. I want everyone to be educated about this stuff and know that the Cargill v. Garland case is going to be the case that protects 20 to 40 million Americans from losing their gun rights.
I want to just mention one thing real quick before we head out on today's video. I want to just say that I appreciate your willingness to show so much solidarity, right? I agree. It's time to circle the wagons. Like, I know that we all have our indifferences about, some gun groups are at each other's throats, or there's been, things going on. I get that. But it is important that we try our best to show solidarity. And, it's time to circle the wagons. And this is definitely a circle the wagons moment. So I know in a previous video we had discussed this case very briefly and just kind of giving you the super glassed over version. But I'm really happy that I got to hear it from the horse's mouth and that I got to talk to you and that we got to bring this out to light. And I hope that, if some of you can pitch in a few bucks to help Michael out, I'm sure he would appreciate it. And all the gun owners around the country. I mean, this has some far-reaching implications, and I hope that you'll pitch in a few bucks to support his efforts, because these lawsuits are not cheap. And this is your name on the lawsuit. This isn't some gun group. This is your personal money that you spent to conduct this legal proceedings.
And as like I always like to say, more guns equals less crime. You go out there and you buy yourself a gun.
That's right. That's right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time, and I hope your power gets back on, because it's snowing, it's cold. Y'all aren't used to that in Texas. All right. Do you own a blanket? I mean,
I don't think we own a jacket, so we're in trouble. We're used to 100 degrees here. We're not used to ice and snow and no power for 24 hours.
What's all this talk about global warming? I'm not sure I'm seeing that too much.
Absolutely. But it's going to be okay. Eventually they'll get the power back on and we'll be just fine.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me here on today's Gun Gripe, Michael. I'm going to go over to this other mode real quick and do a quick outro. But look, y'all, thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed today's Gun Gripe. I love having guests here on the channel. I mean, don't get me wrong. Chad and I do a good job of breaking things down, but I always like to bring some different perspective into what we're doing. And I think it's important that you put a name with the face, that you know the type of people that are fighting for your rights every single day, and that these lawsuits affect real people in their everyday lives, and they do have far-reaching implications for you as well. So thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate all of you. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. My dogs are barking. All right, y'all.